Greetings and salutations, everyone. My name is Andrew Kirchhoff, and welcome to my YouTube channel. Today, we're talking about my strength of schedule for the rest of the 2019 fantasy football season. On today's episode, we're going to be talking about the strength of schedule for the running back, wide receiver, tight end, quarterback, and defensive positions going into the fantasy football playoffs. Now, what exactly does that cover? That covers weeks 14, 15, and 16 to kind of give you guys a determination or a little bit of insight on who truly has the easiest matchups. Now, by popular demand, we're going to be reviewing strength of schedule because just a couple weeks back, around week 7, we talked about strength of schedule for every single position to kind of give us a little bit of an idea of who should perhaps we should be going after and trading for because their fantasy football playoff schedule could perhaps even win us a championship. Now, we're going to be looking at every single position. We're not going to really be comparing to last time. I kind of just want to give you a baseline indication on what we're going to see for the next coming weeks and who really has the best matchups. Now, I know we're going into week 12 and many of you have had your trade deadlines passed, but if in fact there are players here that you are interested in because of how good their schedule looks, to have perhaps go even pick them up off the waivers, you can absolutely do so. But for those of you who are still, have it available, trade waiver wire, deadline available, go ahead. Make some trades, see how everything goes. Now, before we begin today's video, let me remind all of you, if you have not yet already, click that subscribe button, join the community, help us get to that 13,000 subscriber mark. I really do appreciate every single one of you who like the videos, watch the videos, and comment down below, especially those of you who are a part of the notification gang who have clicked the notification bell to stay up to date on my latest content. You guys are first down there in the comment section, so I really do appreciate you guys every single time you guys are there. So thank you again. All right. So, hey everybody, how's everybody doing? I hope everyone's doing well on this fantastic Friday going into week 12. Hopefully we've already clinched our playoff spots, but we have 2 more weeks until we really have to, maybe perhaps pick up some 2 wins here in order to make those fantasy playoffs. So, starting off with the top, to the left of me here is the running back strength of schedule for the rest of the season, weeks 14, 15, and 16. Now, we have teams top to bottom from the easiest strength of schedule to the most difficult. Now, the way I calculated this was, as many of you have seen throughout my video's history, I always talk about matchups and how many points defenses give up to opposing running backs or wide receivers, etc. And as of right now, in terms of the difficulty of those matchups, the Minnesota Vikings have by far the easiest matchup, as a total of 12 as their total strength of schedule and an average of those divided by 3, the 3 games that they will play in the fantasy playoffs. Dalvin Cook seems like he will have the easiest strength of schedule, which is almost identical to what we talked about almost nearly, a month plus ago. Dalvin Cook has maintained, or at least the Minnesota Vikings' strength of schedule for the fantasy football playoffs have maintained their consistency. Now, there are other teams that aren't going to be in the top 12 despite having been in the top 12 a couple weeks back because perhaps the defenses that they are going to play against have tightened up, have played better, or have been winning more games as of late. And like the Pittsburgh Steelers, if we go back and we look at what the Pittsburgh Steelers were giving up in the first month and a half of the season, as a defense, they weren't great. As an offense, they weren't great. But as of late, they've been winning games. They've been playing far better on defense, and that makes a pretty big difference in terms of giving up points to opposing running backs. So people who have to play them in the playoffs will struggle. But anyway, just to kind of give you a little bit of insight, right? Some of the top teams here with some top running backs. Let's look at the very bottom, right? New Orleans Saints were down there last time we talked about these guys, but I'm not afraid of Alvin Kamara because majority of his work is going to be in the passing game. Majority of his work is not going to technically have to come on the ground. This is not a 200-yard rusher. This is not a guy that's going to have a pop-off game. He is a guy that is going to work in PPR formats, get a bunch of receptions, then get goal line carries. That is exactly his value. So I'm not worried about his strength of schedule going down there. Neither am I worried about Christian McCaffrey down below or a guy like Ezekiel Elliott down there in the mid-tier range. Even though their strength of schedule is difficult, I'm still running with my studs. That is not a problem. This is basically just to show you just exactly where everyone stands. Some people will have easier matchups. Some people will have a higher likelihood of success because of that. But it's not the only determining factor. I talk about matchups a lot, but there are so many variables in fantasy football that this is not the only determining factor of whether a player is going to play well. There are so many injury factors or game scripts or there's a million things that you can take into account that will perhaps lean you into a successful week or a complete, disaster as we've seen in the past. Now, I wanted to focus on a couple players in the top 12 specifically. Now, obviously, we talked about Dalvin Cook. Other guys like the Oakland Raiders running back Josh Jacobs have an extremely easy schedule. Chris Carson there, David Montgomery. I mean, they have very easy schedule. Even the Jacksonville Jaguars up here with Leonard Fournette, who was only given 9 touches last week, right? I was always wondering, why didn't they feed him the ball? Doug Marrone came out, said, we're going to continue to feed this guy the ball. We have to. Strength of schedule looking up for him, so hopefully they'll feed him. Now, let's talk about something in specific. I want to talk about specific players here. The 3 players that I wanted to focus in on at the running back position was Phillip Lindsay, Sony Michel, and Chris Carson. Now, let's start with Chris Carson, because I know Chris Carson's owned by everybody, and pretty much nobody really wants to trade him, right? But thus far this season, he's been a very good running back. Now, when we look at his weeks 14, 15, and 16, the Rams, the Carolina Panthers, and the Arizona Cardinals. We all know the Carolina Panthers are not a good defense, especially against the run. We talked about that for weeks, if not months, and we have all determined that they cannot stop the run. That's easy pickings. In week 16 against the Arizona Cardinals, that again is another matchup in the division that this Seattle Seahawks team is going to have to win in order to perhaps even get a first round bye. So they're going to go tough and hard through the first, 16 games this season. Week 17, not so much, but we'll see. Again, now in week 14, they play against the Rams. Now the Rams technically in terms of statistics are pretty good against stopping opposing running backs. But when we go back and we see what Chris Carson was able to do to them last time they played, Chris Carson had 18.8 points against that defense, had over 100 rushing yards, had a receiving touchdown. This was a guy that I'm telling you, even in tough matchups, has played well. Look at him. Against Baltimore, sure, was tough. But Tampa Bay, San Francisco as of late, playing well. All right, let's talk about a guy like Sony Michel here. Sony Michel's a little tricky because when we look at his statistics, when we look at how many points he puts up, it's atrocious. It is truly terrible. Even in that game where he had 21.9 points, it was 3 rushing touchdowns that launched him there. He did not have a good game on the ground. But look at his schedule upcoming. You play against Dallas this week, cannot stop the run. Houston, we just saw Jonathan Williams murder this team for 100 rushing yards on the ground. The Kansas City Chiefs have been struggling. Even going back to last year, couldn't stop the run. Cincinnati, one of the worst against the run. And Buffalo, as of late, has definitely struggled. Now, am I crazy to think Sony Michel could have a good rest of the season? I don't know. Maybe I'm the only one that really does believe that this team is willing to give him the ball. Sure, they haven't proved it to an extent, but they do give this guy 10 plus touches on average. Probably, I think it's like 14 carries on average per game. And that's not enough, surely, because I know that he's capable of more. If we go back, graphic on the screen just popped up, and look at what this guy did in the actual National Football League playoffs last season against the Chargers, then in the AFC Championship game against the Kansas City Chiefs, and in the Super Bowl against the Rams. They ran Sony Michel so much that he carried this team. 6 touchdowns in 3 games. Look at his yard per carry averages. I'm telling you, if this team wants to, they can run the ball. Sure, they're missing their center. They're missing James Devlin. They don't have Gronk blocking. But I promise you, this team can run the ball. And because of how much the wide receiver position is injured and they've been struggling, they have to get back to the run. I feel like Sony Michel not a bad option in the coming weeks, especially in the fantasy football playoffs. And the last guy we need to talk about, the thumbnail himself, Phillip Lindsay. The next 5 weeks for Phillip Lindsay should be easy. Now, the issue is Phillip Lindsay has a guy by the name of Royce Freeman behind him. But we all know Phillip Lindsay is far more talented. And we know Phillip Lindsay's had a very easy schedule this season. We can see there's a lot of green matchups there, and there are a lot to come in the coming weeks. Buffalo, easy matchup on the ground. The Chargers should also be. Houston, again, Jonathan Williams, over 100 on him. Then we have Kansas City and Detroit. These are games that this team are going to compete in. I mean, they competed last week. We're almost able to pick up a win against the Vikings. This is a team that has not given up. They are going to continue to play hard, and I think Phillip Lindsay could be a good contributor for this offense. All right, now that we've kind of covered strength of schedule, obviously the graphics that I just showed you are from like the Yahoo Fantasy app. You go to the Yahoo Fantasy app, you click on a specific player, and you can find those stats. So you can find them on a bunch of other players. I won't be showing them for the rest of this video because there are a bunch of players that we can cover at every single position. But again, there's only a limited amount of time that I could talk about each specific player. But again, go check those out. Even your Yahoo Fantasy app, your ESPN, I'm sure, or even your like NFL Network app or whatever, NFL.com app for fantasy. I'm sure it'll have something of that sort, okay? So let's go ahead and move on. Let's talk about wide receivers going forward. Now, boom, graphic has changed. So the left of me is a little different now. We have here the wide receiver strength of schedule for the rest of the season. And as it currently stands, is there an air raid on my house? Oh my goodness. I don't know if you guys heard that, the helicopter. Okay, but anyway, looking at the strength of schedule for the rest of the season, the Indianapolis Colts with T.Y. Hilton. T.Y. Hilton had the easy strength of schedule. Last time when we looked at the strength of schedule around week 7, T.Y. Hilton was the thumbnail for a reason, because he had such an easy strength of schedule going into the fantasy football playoffs, and that has not changed at all. In terms of difficulty, they have by far the easiest schedule, and one of the only teams that has a single-digit strength of schedule coming up for them. Now, when we think about what T.Y. Hilton was able to produce last night, I know many of you may have played him in Thursday night's matchup against the Houston Texans, which wasn't a bad decision, but the issue was he was on a pitch count, which means this team did not fully believe he was healthy. They wanted to ease him back. They did not believe that they needed T.Y. Hilton to win. And on top of that, T.Y. Hilton dropped many clutch passes that would have given him an at least balanced amount of points. He would have at least broke like a 10-point fantasy week. Fortunately, he was not able to do that, but I still don't think we should shun a guy like T.Y. Hilton, because he's going to be able to help you for the rest of the season. Moving on, the Miami Dolphins. The Miami Dolphins have the easiest strength of schedule for the last 3 games this season. Out of every team, they by far have the easiest strength of schedule. The teams that they play are so bad and are just as bad as them, to the point where I'm thinking Miami might be able to win. And when we talk about wide receivers for Miami, there's only one. There's Devontae Parker, and that is it. And Devontae Parker has been so consistent this season in the last 6 to 7, 8 weeks. He has continuously put up points. He has continuously been the number 1 wide receiver for the gunslinger Ryan Fitzpatrick. He has scored touchdowns. He has been consistent. And he's been the player that the Miami Dolphins drafted all those years ago and expected him to become, which is absolutely fantastic, because they really invested a lot of time in a player like this. Hopefully, you've invested in him as well. You've picked him up off of waivers those many weeks ago when I mentioned him, because I'm telling you, he's going to pay dividends in the fantasy football playoffs. Moving on, Tennessee wide receivers. I only want A.J. Brown. Wide receivers for the Washington Redskins, Terry McLaurin, but even then the quarterback position scares me. The New York Giants, Darius Slayton, Sterling Shepard, Golden Tate. That could be of value. When we looked back at the running back strength of schedule, Saquon had himself a top 12 strength of schedule rest of season for the fantasy football playoffs this year. Then we have the Chargers, the Lions, Tampa Bay. These are good offenses with good receivers, Kenny Golladay and Marvin Jones. When you go look at that strength of schedule, outside of week 16, they have some pretty easy matchups. Even this week, they have easy matchups. Jeff Driscoll is a decent enough quarterback to get the job done. After what I saw him produce last season for the Cincinnati Bengals, helping them almost win some games there, and then what he was able to do against the Cowboys last week, I'm thinking Jeff Driscoll is a lot better than people give him credit for, and he's going to at least increase the value of those wide receivers, Golladay and Marvin Jones, who are 2 top 12 wide receivers in half-point PPR right now. Those guys are of value and hopefully can at least continue to be consistent to an extent rest of season. Obviously, we have another duo. We're talking about the duo of Godwin and Evans. Hopefully, they can maintain some relevancy as the weeks go on, because I know they are slowing down as we progress here. The Seattle Seahawks, DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett, the Carolina Panthers, DJ Moore playing extremely consistent as of the last 3 weeks. We are seeing some good trends here. Hopefully, you can go ahead, check some of these guys out. But again, a lot of the matchups or a lot of the good players, even if they have bad matchups, looking at like the New Orleans Saints, they're in the bottom 12. Is that, they're in the bottom 10. Is that scary? No. Michael Thomas is a stud. Down there below them, the Vikings. I don't care. I'm playing Stephon Diggs and Adam Thielen. When Adam Thielen's healthy, sure. But I'm playing them. Julio Jones and the Falcons, absolutely playing them. Devontae Adams and the Packers, Tyreek Hill on the very bottom, Julian Edelman on the very bottom. I'm playing Cooper Kupp. I'm playing these guys. I'm playing them. Again, matchups are valuable, but they don't tell the whole story. Anyway, this was the wide receiver strength of schedule. We're not going to go and look at specific player schedules. You can go check those out for the players that you have again, or for perhaps guys that you are looking to invest in accordingly. All right, let's go ahead and move on. Let's talk about some tight end strength of schedules right now. All right, moved on. Let's move this to the right direction. Here we go. So the tight end strength of schedule rest of season. The Chicago Bears have the best strength of schedule. What does that mean? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. There is not a tight end that I want to trust on this team. Adam Shaheen, injured. Trey Burton, injured reserve. There is nobody on this team that is going to catch the ball. And to be honest, I don't really trust anybody maybe outside of Tariq Cohen or maybe Allen Robinson to catch the ball on this team. And that's about it. If Taylor Gabriel or Anthony Miller want to get more targets, Anthony Miller got about 11 targets last week. Beautiful. But if they want to get more targets, then sure. But at the tight end position, it's not looking great. Other than that, a guy like Darren Fells or Akins, perhaps for the Texans. Is that even a good idea? Not really. Not interested in that. Then we talk about the Arizona Cardinals. What, Max Williams and Charles Clay? No. We don't want to deal with that. But there's a couple guys that have decent strength of schedules. We have teams in the AFC North. We have guys, or is it the AFC North? No, the NFC North. Excuse me. The NFC North. We have the Detroit Lions, we have the Vikings, and we have the Packers. Similar to the Bears, right? All of these guys have easy strength of schedules upcoming. Hawkinson, Kyle Rudolph, Jimmy Graham. Jimmy Graham, I don't trust, but Hawkinson and Kyle Rudolph, I'm willing to roll the dice on. If Kyle Rudolph is available in your league and you are struggling for a tight end and you are a Austin Hooper owner, why wouldn't you have him already? Why wouldn't you have already picked him up weeks ago? This guy's been on a tear for the last 5 weeks of the season and has been consistent. A guy like TJ Hawkinson probably is still available as well. This week plays against Washington. That is a defense that did not want to cover Ryan Griffin last week. Gave him 100 receiving yards on 5 receptions and a touchdown. Not a bad play, and even in his fantasy football playoffs, has a very good schedule. Outside of that, when we think about stud tight ends, we think of Hunter Henry with the Los Angeles Chargers right there with a great matchups coming forward. We think about Travis Kelce in the top end in terms of schedule. Who else are we thinking of? We're thinking of George Kittle. Where are you at, George Kittle? George Kittle on the bottom. Don't worry, he'll be fine. Then we think about Mark Andrews. Where's Mark Andrews? On the bottom. You know what? Whatever. He's going to be fine. We're going to have to deal with it. These are guys that, yes, even though they don't have great strength of schedules, we're going to have to deal with it. Sure, other guys. Eric Ebron on the bottom of this list. Darren Waller on the bottom of this list. They're not great matchups. Obviously, I prefer matchups for, Kelce, Ertz, Everett, perhaps, obviously Hunter Henry, Greg Olsen, or David Njoku coming back, perhaps. These are good matchups. But either way, these are the strength of schedule for the tight end position going into weeks 14, 15, and 16. Let's go ahead and move on. Let's get a deep dive on just exactly how good, as of right now, the quarterback position has been. All right, moving on. Here it is. So let's talk about the quarterback position and where they're going to go in the fantasy football playoffs. Now, like I was mentioning earlier, the Miami Dolphins have one of the easiest schedules. Now, many of you may be thinking, should I be picking up Ryan Fitzpatrick and playing him? Now, I don't want to 100% definitively say, yes, that is what you need to do, because there are other quarterbacks that have very good schedules going into the fantasy football play. We have Brandon Allen, for God's sake, for the Denver Broncos, who has a ridiculously good schedule. Ryan Tannehill, who has been a 20-point guy each of the last 4 weeks for the Tennessee Titans, has a very easy strength of schedule. Jameis Winston is going to have a walk in the park. Baker Mayfield, like we talked about in Hidden Gems last week, has a walk in the park. Daniel Jones, Jacoby Brissett, Nick Foles. These are quarterbacks that many people don't own. When we talk about, besides Jameis Winston and maybe Jacoby Brissett, none of these guys are owned. Really, none of them are owned. And I do think that you should have at least one of these guys as your backup quarterback going into the fantasy playoffs. Now, if you're someone that has Lamar Jackson and Russell Wilson and you've ridden with both of them the entire year, I don't know why you didn't trade one, because you should have by now. Because having the extra value at a different position that you could have inherited there and then have one of these backups available is far more valuable. So as of right now, if you have an extra quarterback that is a stud that you can trade and get away and give away and at least get some value back, I think you should do that, and you should pick up one of these quarterbacks. Specifically, I like Ryan Tannehill of the group. He has played well. His wide receivers have an easy strength of schedule. Derrick Henry's going to run over fools. And as it looks right now, he's really kind of winning that job and perhaps even keeping that job for next year. So they'll continue on this path. Even Baker Mayfield, a guy that has to prove a lot of people wrong, has a very easy strength of schedule. And I think this offense could potentially pick up a lot of wins in the coming future. They've won a couple in a row now. So hopefully maybe they can win another one this week. Obviously against Miami should be easy, but going forward in the fantasy playoffs should be easier task. Now when we look at the tougher matchups at the quarterback position, Mahomes, Josh Allen, Matt Ryan, Jared Goff, Dak Prescott, Drew Brees, all on the bottom. Then we even have Derek Carr. We have Lamar Jackson down there. We have Kirk Cousins. We have Aaron Rodgers down here. These are good quarterbacks, and they still have some of the toughest strength of schedules. The Kansas City Chiefs, in terms of wide receivers and quarterback, have always had the toughest strength of schedule this year. It's unfortunate that that's what they've been given, but they're going to fight through it, and they're going to play well. And I'm not worried about that. But when we look at some of the easier strength of schedules, Carson Wentz, Russell Wilson, Jimmy Garoppolo, those guys are going to benefit from those schedules. They really, truly are. They are going to feast because of that. When you go and you look at exactly what the Philadelphia Eagles play in the playoffs, they get to play against the Giants and the Washington Redskins in weeks 14 and 15. 16, they will have the division on the line against the Dallas Cowboys. That's perfectly fine. That's exactly what I want to invest in. Not only is it a narrative that I want to see unfold, but I want to see this team try to compete for the division and perhaps win it. On the back of a Carson Wentz with a very easy strength of schedule. Anyway, so now that you've kind of absorbed this, we've kind of looked at it up and down, you can go check out some of these guys, especially those of them who have very easy strength of schedules upcoming. Baker Mayfield, Ryan Tannehill, Daniel Jones, perhaps maybe Nick Foles. Go check those guys out. Perhaps go pick them up for the rest of the season. All right, let's go ahead and move on. Let's talk about the last strength of schedule position that we want to talk about. This one was by extremely popular demand. I heard a lot of people ask, Andrew, I want to see the rest of season defensive strength of schedule. And to be honest, there's a reason why I never did it, because I don't think this determines anything. Not one thing at all. Now, certainly, okay, the Miami Dolphins have the easiest strength of schedule by far, and it's not even close. Now, do you think I'm going to play the Miami Dolphins defense in the fantasy football playoffs? Do you think I want to put that in my lineup? Absolutely not. I would rather lose with the Baltimore Ravens defense or the Steelers defense or the New England defense or the 49ers defense in my lineup than play the Miami Dolphins and hope this defense doesn't tank in those 3 weeks. That's what I'd rather do. And honestly, that's what I'm going to do. I'm not going to trust the Miami defense. But when you go and you look at the Ravens defense and what they have upcoming, the Eagles defense, the Steelers defense, these are defenses that are going to dominate. But when we look at Miami's defense, they're washed. So is the Giants. So is the Bengals. So is the Cardinals. So is the Raiders. I mean, these are not good defenses in general. How can I trust them despite the matchup? Because when these matchups are so bad, what is that going to pretty much promote? Shootouts. That is what it's going to promote. It's going to promote a shootout between the two teams. That's why when you look at the strength of schedule for the Miami Dolphins, they have one of the easiest for the quarterback and the wide receiver position. They play against teams that are terrible on defense, going to get scored on, but they're going to give it back because Miami, as of right now, in terms of total points, have the lowest points amongst all defenses. So, am I going to play their defense? Absolutely not. Not going to happen. You could not pay me to do it unless you got, listen, actually, you know what? You could pay me to do it, but it's going to have to be a hefty sum. Let's be honest, okay? So, anyway, some of the better defenses that you might want to consider picking up, the Indianapolis Colts, not a bad defense, but they have tough matchups. Like they have to play against Tampa Bay. Sure, Jameis can throw them 3 picks, but again, it could be difficult. Carolina Panthers, they were better earlier on in the season than when they were getting sacks. Haven't done anything as of late. Perhaps the Seattle Seahawks, maybe they want to get after it against some of these teams. Not bad matchups, to be totally honest. They could perhaps put something together. But in terms of defenses that you really want, they're probably already gone. Like the top defenses that I want in the fantasy playoffs that I've picked up everywhere, the Ravens, the Steelers, and the Eagles. That's the 3 that I wanted, and that's the 3 that I got. And not by accident, because of how good they've been this year and because of how good they're going to continue to be because of their strength of schedule. Now, defenses that I don't want to play in the fantasy playoffs. Am I scared of playing the Chicago Bears defense? To an extent, perhaps, but not really. They're still a decent defense. They're still a top 12 defense in terms of fantasy points. They can't stop the run. But if they're going to play against teams, they're going to blow them out. If they play against the Kansas City Chiefs, or I don't know who they play against. If they play against teams like that, where they're going to get points dropped on their head, I might want to avoid that. I might want to just play like the defenses that I like to play right now, right? That always clamp up at the back end of the season. The New Orleans Saints. The New Orleans Saints have been a defense that, especially when Teddy Bridgewater came in, they decided as a unit, we need to step up. We cannot be as bad as we've been in the early half of seasons. We need to play better as a unit, and we need to carry this team as a defense and special teams, and they've done that this season. Now, hopefully, as they continue, they're going to continue to clamp up. Weeks 14, 15, 16, tougher matchups. You have to take on, the 49ers in week 14, but that is an NFC championship game. I mean, we could really see a low scoring back and forth in that matchup. Maybe you want to play a New Orleans Saints defense and test, Jimmy Garoppolo's arm. Perhaps you want to do that. But anyway, this is the defensive strength of schedule. Do with it as you may. Be responsible with it. Don't make too many cute decisions. Again, I want to thank everybody for watching. I appreciate you guys spending your time here today talking about strength of schedules. Hopefully this helped you out in any sort of capacity. I know many of you were asking for this, so I went ahead and got this done. Again, next week, we'll talk about it on Sunday, 8:30 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. We're going to talk about next week's schedule in terms of fantasy football because Thursday there are 3 games, and that is going to be quite significant. So I'm going to try to get all of my rankings out before Thursday morning, so that everybody can have their lineups ready, set to go. But you gotta be patient because some of these videos I'm not going to be, I'm going to have to record like 4 videos in a day, and that's not fun, not one bit. But we'll talk about it next week. We'll get there we'll cross that bridge when we get there. But anyway, I appreciate everybody. Thank you again for watching today. Hopefully this helped you guys out. If it did, click that like button down below. And if you guys, want to ask any questions down below, I'm sure somebody's going to answer you there. Otherwise, you go over to my Patreon and support the Patreon. Unlimited questions answered. How you doing? All right. Anyway, thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you guys. Peace.